Hi everybody, welcome to the 9th episode of the Wim Lex podcast. Today we're delighted that Daan Luining has joined us from Meatable. And Meatable is a lab-based meat production company. They will go to market in a couple of years and they will try to disrupt the global meat industry. What is interesting as well is that Alexander's father-in-law has a cattle farm and I actually don't eat meat. So this will be a very interesting podcast. Welcome, Daan.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm the CTO of the company, so I deal with everything technical and scientific. My background is in cell molecular biology and tissue engineering. I've been involved in this for quite a while. I've participated in the project for the first cultured meat hamburger that was made by Mark Post here in the Netherlands.
And Moza Meats, right?
Moza Meats, yeah, but at that time it was still at the university.
Okay, yeah.
So I was an academic at the time.
Yeah.
And after that, I moved to New York to join the company of New Harvest, which is a NGO, so a non-profit organization that funds academic research in this space, because there has been a lack of that all over the world. And there I got into contact with so many different people that are participating in the field, that had ideas about the field, and got really well connected, and also started to formulate a roadmap, which is basically from A to Z, a plan how you should develop cultured meat from the cell to the final product. And I got in contact with a professor from the University of Cambridge called Mark Cotter. And with him and his breakthrough technology, we now developed the scientific roadmap. And together with my co-founder, Klein de Noot, he did all the business part of it, because as a scientist, it's sometimes hard to also do both sides. So I'm very glad that he's aboard too. Developed a roadmap from both sides, and now just rolling it out and starting this company and doing the science.
Very impressive journey that you just described.
Thank you.
Let's start with the why. Obviously, the global meat industry is a multi-billion, maybe even trillion euro industry. And we've been eating more and more meat over the past 50 years. Could you explain to the listeners why you want to disrupt this market?
So like you said, meat is the large-scale meat production has some fundamental issues. The resources that are required to make meat are so immense and so damaging to the environment that we cannot sustain this for much longer. We need 15,000 liters of water to produce 1 kilogram of beef. We use 33% of all arable land to grow the crops that eventually these animals eat. And also the methane that these animals produce contributes to almost 15% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And increasing population also increased wealth equals increased meat consumption, and there's no way we can sustain this at a large scale or a larger scale. So that's why we have to do everything. So it's not only cultured meat, but we think that this can make the biggest contribution to that. But also eating less meat, also eating plant-based alternatives, just to make sure that we don't destroy ourselves just by eating meat. And cultured meat, I think, has a large potential in that, because it actually is the same thing. And it can reduce all these resources necessary to create meat many folds over. And you don't have to change people's mind about meat. So you don't have to tell them, no, you cannot eat meat because it's bad for the environment. You're replacing it with something that is as good as the real thing, because it is the real thing. So people don't have a reason anymore to say, well, the plant-based alternatives are not nice, or I don't like them so much, because if I can present you with a hamburger, 2 hamburgers, and I will tell you, well, tell me which one is cultured and which one is not, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference, I think it will be very easy for people to adopt this new technology very fast.
And you mentioned hamburgers. Is beef the first market within the meat industry that you're going after?
Yeah, so we are doing first beef because we have a beef expert in our team, but we are also rapidly looking into pork, chicken, other mammals especially, and then afterwards maybe moving to fish, but that's much harder, and we don't know if we still want to do that. There's other companies already working on that. But beef for us is also a reason because it's the biggest contributor to the resource depletion, also the methane production. But of course, chickens are being more eaten and pigs are in between there, so we're definitely looking to diversify. But for now, we're focusing on beef and afterwards moving into other animals.
Cool. And let's talk about the science that you're using to develop cultured meat. You said before that you closely cooperate with the University of Cambridge, with Mark Cotter, and also have developed a specific technology to mimic or to actually make meat, to grow lab-based meat. Could you dive a little bit deeper into the process.
Yes, I love to. So what we're doing is we are getting cells from the animal, and we're doing this in a completely non-invasive way. We're taking blood that retains in the umbilical cord after a calf is born. So there's a pregnant cow, and the calf gets out of the cow, and then the umbilical cord it breaks, and then from the leftover blood, we take it into a bag, and we isolate pluripotent cells from there. And pluripotent cells have a large proliferation capacity, and proliferation means they can grow a lot. And also they're very plastic, and that means that they can turn into multiple cell types, so either fat, liver maybe even, but also muscle. And of course we are most interested in the fat and the muscle cells.
And do you know that beforehand, how the pluripotent cells will develop?
Yes, and that's where the technology from Cambridge comes in. So the current status quo is that these cells can grow a large amount and they can be turned into anything, but the current protocol to turn them into a thing is very lengthy, very costly, and very inefficient. So if you go from the pluripotent state to the final adult stem cell, you end up with 15% of your total cell population turning into the cell type, and it takes about 60 days.
Is that where these expensive burgers came from? I read about something sold for, I don't know, 50,000 euros or dollars.
No, so the first one was 250,000 euros, and those were made differently. So they used muscle satellite cells, which are muscle stem cells. So what you do if you're starting this process, you must make a choice from which cells am I going to make cultured meat. Am I going to do that with the pluripotent cells, which has a large proliferation capacity but very hard to control? Or are you doing this with adult muscle stem cells, which can proliferate limited, but can be turned into muscle very easily? So you have to make a trade-off. But we bridge that gap. So we use the pluripotent cells, and with the technology developed in Cambridge, we can turn the pluripotent cells into adult cells within 5 days and 100% efficiency, which is unheard of. This is really a paradigm shift in the entire field, and also in the medical field it has large implementation. So we're very excited to be using this and having the best of both worlds. So using the pluripotent cells and being able to differentiate them into the cells that we need. Completely animal-free and within a reduced time for many times over.
And how fast will a cell grow into real meat? What's the production process, so to say?
So if you do the calculations, and especially with thinking about exponential growth of the cells, so 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, and so on, so they multiply exponentially. We think the entire process can be done from a batch of cells within 3 weeks.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Compare that to what it takes to grow an animal. Yeah, that's I think 3 years.
Yeah.
And it's also really nicely tunes into supply and demand, because now if there's nice weather during the summer, you have to think 3 years ahead. Like saying, okay, well, I have to have enough hamburgers by that time to feed the people that want to barbecue. And that's quite tough, right? 3 years looking ahead is quite difficult. But if you're thinking about doing this in 3 weeks, you can make a forecast for 3 weeks, right? So what you're doing is then increasing production so you have enough meat for the people at that time to eat. So you don't have overproduction. You don't have what the Americans call glut. So this is the overproduction of meat that stays in the stores that eventually spoils and then need to be discarded of. Now you can really fine-tune the amount of food that people require, and even doing this locally, right? You can do this technology inside of a building in a city. You don't need to have meadows or anything around the city where you transport your food from inside the city. You can basically produce this inside your city, so that you can call this locally farmed meat without any transportation, and also really tailored to the supply and demand of that area.
And your laboratory, is that based in the city as well?
It's close to Leiden. We're in the Bioscience Park because at the moment the technology resides inside of laboratories. Yeah. But eventually you should imagine this just as another food producing company, right? Like the Campinas, you don't call it lab-made yogurt. You just call it yogurt because it's made in a factory without any labs. And so the technology now resides in labs. So that's why we're using the facilities over there that facilitate us with the permits and also the laboratory requirements that we are using. But afterwards, we're thinking very quickly to moving just into a production facility.
Great.
How much meat can you produce by just one cohort of stem cells from a cow?
That's also the slogan that we made for our company is one cell can change everything, and we really mean that because using the pluripotent cells instead of the satellite cells, the muscle satellite cells, the pluripotent cells can grow indefinite. they have unlimited proliferation capacity. So you can really feed the world with a single cell just by multiplying it over and over again. And of course, you need to check the cell if it still performs well, if it doesn't show any drawbacks, if it just performs as you want to. But what you do is you hold a master batch, and then you take a sample from that, and those that you expand and control, and then eventually when the sample that you took is starting to deteriorate or starting to perform less, then you go back and just take a very small sample again from your original batch to grow that again. So you can keep a constant production level and also keep continuing growing the same cells over again. So you can really control the process and really have a consistent outcome of your production process.
And what are we seeing? When do we see this in a broad environment? So we have seen now the examples of the 200,000 euro burger, which is applicable for some people in the world,
very true.
But not for most people. Though, how long will it take this industry, or especially like Meatable, to establish a process that can build a hamburger where the meat or like the artificial created meat costs only like €1 or €2, which leads them to a situation where you can really sell it to the masses?
So there are multiple tiers to that question, because large-scale production can be cut up in 2 and 3 different stages. One is the demo stage, so that we're doing right now, small-scale, just proof of concept showing that the process works. And very small volumes, maybe just for a tasting or maybe for an event which you invite people to taste it. Next phase is a pilot plant where you're doing a bit more quantity and also optimizing the process for the larger scale part, which comes afterwards. But then already having maybe selected restaurants that you can supply regularly. And then, of course, from those lessons that you learn from there, and of course the installed capacity, because it takes time to build a building, it takes time to install these things. But afterwards, then you can go to really large scales, and then you're going to large volumes that you hopefully we can supply to McDonald's and all the other stores and every supermarket that you can imagine. And the larger you go, of course, the price will drop with that. So in the beginning, of course, we think we can, it's hard to say numbers, but we hopefully will end up between 20 and 30 euros for a hamburger at the demo scale.
And when will that be ready?
Within 3 years.
Within 3 years.
Yes,
okay.
We hope within 3 years.
Yeah.
And from there, of course, we won't be selling it at a large profit, because at the time, you can only do limited amounts. You want to get people accustomed to it, get people involved and get used to the idea of eating this product. And eventually, also with skill, the price drops, and then you can, of course, get more people involved for a lower price. So that's basically the tactic to do that.
And you've raised a lot of capital. First round, $3.5 million, from, I think, also well-known VCs. Where do you spend the money? And is it mostly spent on the laboratory itself, on the production process?
Yes, it's mostly R&D at the moment.
Okay.
So really people and equipment and getting the process, but also already looking ahead for regulatory parts and also for a bit for marketing. So it's not only R&D, but most of it is R&D, because that's most important, right? You really want to have the first proof of concept ready so that you can show people this is how it's going to look like at a larger scale, and this is how it tastes like, and also really play with that to see if you can optimize on that part.
And I think you announced the raising of capital as well in a press release. I think that got coverage in Forbes, in Business Insider, in many well-known news publications. What was the general response that you received from the market, and maybe even from potential consumers to clean meat or cultured meat?
It is overwhelmingly positive. I haven't had a single person that says, well, this is a terrible idea, we shouldn't be doing this. And I think that is also a sentiment that is increasing a lot. So maybe there are people that are not very fond of the idea, but it's such a small amount of people that think like that you have a choice, right? If you don't have to eat it. And the positive response that we get, I think a lot of people are waiting basically on this product to happen. I think by the time that we launch, you'll have lines bigger than an iPhone X launch.
But there will probably be some hesitance as well from the public as well, because they're used to seeing a cow in the field and understanding that you have slaughterhouses where that cow is being turned into a beefsteak or a hamburger. That image sticks to many people's mind. And you're changing that image. You already said, well, we're in the future won't be a lab but a factory, but still that's another image than that idyllic sight of a cow in a nice outside environment being grass-fed.
I think not many people have that idea anymore.
Okay.
I think more people are starting to realize
That's how it's being marketed, though.
Right, but I think more and more people are starting to realize that this is not the case anymore.
Okay.
That, of course, I truly believe in the Netherlands and in Europe we have pretty high standards when it comes to animals, but in a large part of the world they don't adhere to that standards. So those are the mega farms, and that's what basically we want to see if we can mitigate that. We don't want to replace or compete with the small farmers or organic farms, because those are fine, right? They treat their animals well, and we don't want to compete with them, but we want to make sure that the big bulks of meat, like the kilo knallers, so the big amounts of meat that you can buy in a store for a fairly cheap price.
That are being produced in factory farms.
Right, those we think we can compete with and will be better for the environment a lot more than competing with the smaller farms. So really, I eat meat. I think organic farming is a great solution to this for still wanting to eat meat but not want to have the big impact. But unfortunately, the cheap amount of bulk meat that is cheap is still being produced and still being bought. And if you can replace that with more sustainable alternative, I think that's already a giant leap in the right direction.
I'd like to understand a little bit more the status of the development. So I just a week ago I heard like a documentary or a podcast about the Haber-Bosch process, which was like invented in the early 20th century to produce like fertilizer. It was like a situation where there wasn't enough fertilizer in the world to feed the people. Though there was like a big race in the scientific industry to create a process to create ammonia out of the air. It was like then invented by Haber-Bosch, which was like a clear demand from the market. There's not enough fertilizer, please produce fertilizer out of the air. Here's like the same situation more or less, and Haber-Bosch, it took them like, I think the race for this solution took them, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years. So is it comparable to this kind of a scientific race in the early 20th century? So are you already very close to the solution, or is the solution already there and now you're only trying to find out what kind of industrial scale could be built upon the existing theoretical solution? So where is it really? So is it clear that there will be something like 3, 4, 5 years, or is there still some scientific hard to solve questions in the air nobody's talking about?
Well, I think it's all of that. So there is something to say about every level of that. So we can already build on the previous knowledge that has been discovered in cell biology. So people have been doing cell biology for a long time, and we are also leaning on that. So the idea of using stem cells and how stem cells react and how stem cells behave on large scale, and also the pharmaceutical industry with large bioreactors, they already has established systems for that. So there's already hardware and knowledge on each side, but eventually the thing where we still have to do some development, and I don't think this is a big scientific question, more of an engineering thing, is making real tissue, real solid tissue. And we also think we have a solution for that. We are collaborating with people that really want to roll this out. So I don't think it's more of a question if, but only a question when. And of course, there are some challenges ahead, and there will be failures. But I don't think that will ruin the entire idea if there are some drawbacks. Of course there is. In every developmental process there's drawbacks, but we have such a solid plan of making this happen, build on rigorous scientific knowledge and the previous known things about these cells, that I have no question that in my mind that this is not going to happen.
And how many teams are working on a solution right now worldwide?
It's not as many as you might think. Depends on how you structurize it. People that are funded, I think it's a handful. And then also in different areas. So some people are specializing, so doing only fat, so doing only beef, doing only seafood, and specialize also in the seafood, or even supporting companies, also doing medium development, so the food for the cells. So it's segmented, and I think it's about a handful, maybe 10 companies total working on this together, working on this.
On a global level?
Yeah, so it really depends on how you determine the company or working on this, because there's people that really want to do this, but they're still in the fundraising process and still figuring out the right model for their company. And those are much more. I think then you're talking about 35 companies who are still looking into what type of niche of this field they can participate, or still busy with their fundraising process. But I think people that are really currently day-to-day working on this, I think it's about 5 to 10 people. groups.
And from what you can see today from a scientific perspective, so how close can you get in I think the meat industry, especially beef meat or cattle meat, is a very special one. Is very subjectively driven. So one person would say this is like the best steak you can eat. Another one, no, that is not. Here's like a much better fillet or whatever. So how will there be like a solution to design like kind of a steak or a T-bone steak or something similar?
Yeah, definitely. And this is also so beautiful about this technology is that you can assert a level of control which you can't over a real animal. You can feed an animal stuff and you can make it happy enough. So like the Wagyu beef, you can massage it and give it beer. But eventually you cannot control how the animal develops or what the nutrient contents in the meat is. But we can. We can basically adjust the feed medium which we give to the cells with specific nutrients which will increase unsaturated fats. Or for the Netherlands, with now that the European Union is turning back the summertime, wintertime thing, we can use some extra vitamin D because we all like sunlight. You can really optimize this. And also for the tissue creation itself, if you're going to stimulate it to move in a specific direction, you can really make the texture of the meat behave in a way that you want and experiment with it. So it becomes really like an engineering issue on how you're structurizing your meat and what nutrient contents will it contain. There's so much more you can do because of you're using cells instead of the entire animal. That is just we're getting into terrain that has not been explored before and which has a massive amount of potential.
And do you then, like with the butter market, foresee that you have like 5 different types of butter, one with vitamin D, another one with a little added sea salt, so that everybody can pick the flavor that is most accustomed to their taste?
I truly believe that will happen. And also maybe
personalized meat.
Personalized meat. And also maybe for athletes, which has increased protein content. Maybe for elderly, that can eat a substance, maybe one of the products, maybe less salt. You can really optimize it for every level of society, which are the requirements. A good example for this is the iodide that we use in salt. They put this inside of salt because everybody eats it, and it prevents a disease called krop, which is a swelling of your thymus. So people are already thinking about this. How can I add nutrients in people's diets to make the population overall healthier? And I think we can make a massive contribution to that.
And you said, okay, the market will be, the product will be after the pilot phase marketable to a small set of test users for €20 for maybe 100 gram of hamburger. When do you see Meatable going mass market?
Well, so what we've been planning right now is in 3 years to the demo, then another 2 to 3 years for the pilot, and then after that, then going to large scale. Okay. So 6 to 8 years will be our timeline to going on this and having a factory.
And the few competitors that are around, and I don't know if I recall it correctly. I've read something about like Memphis meat or something similar. So are they using a similar process or a similar solution, or is every team, every startup in this industry having like a very, very unique view on solving this issue? I
actually don't know. I cannot look in the labs. But I believe that we're having a unique perspective on this using the pluripotent cells with the differentiation technology. I think that's unique in the field because this technology has just been developed and we have an exclusive patent license on it. So I don't think anybody else can or is doing that, but I don't know what the rest of the players are doing.
You know why I'm curious, not because my father-in-law has a cattle which I also manage and sell, which is an interesting business, but it's more like an organic model. It's like not on an industrial scale, but the market is so big. The companies in this market are so big. The increasing demand just from China for pig meat is so big. Why are not like hundreds of teams working on this solution, or even like the big meat companies in the like Vion, for example, are working in this area? That makes me a little bit like I still trust in the solution you're getting, and I hope. And at the end of the day, there's like water and grass, and there must be a process to produce something more effectively than a cow could do. But it still seems hard to believe. So will this point come in the moment when you have this like demo day, or the situation where you can produce something for like a burger for like $30 per, I don't know what it's called in English, pellet or burger burger ingredient. So it's still, it seems very far away. So in 3 years, what you're saying, and even then like an added 3 years to the end of the pilot phase, that is a very short frame of time for such a big industry. And I'm sure we are talking about almost $1 trillion if you're like take into account all the producers in the value chain. It's of course $1 trillion market worldwide.
It is, definitely is. But there already are current established players moving into this field. Tyson has been investing in Memphis Meats, like you said so, and there's a German poultry company that invested in Mosa Meats. So they're already moving into this field because they already see the potential of it. And we are not under the illusion that within 8 years we have a majority market share. This will take time because you need to build a factory. You need to build the installed capacity to scale this. So we're starting anywhere that allows us to go there for regulatory affairs also. And we really are taking this factory by factory. And we're really trying to take it like that. And it will take time, and I don't think 8 years is the timeline at which we have majority market share, like I said, but people are getting more and more used to the idea of reducing the amount of animals in the need for having your food.
And maybe a side question, though, why is fish so much harder?
Oh, because we have been doing lots of research on mammalian cells. So mouse, human, and other species, they've been researching that in the lab. So we have a large amount of knowledge on how they behave and how you control them and what their needs are. And for fish, there hasn't been a big amount of funding to research that. So the model organism in the lab is zebrafish, but they don't really compare nicely to salmon or tuna, which are the fish, of course, that are eaten in bulk. And so that's the thing, right? Nobody has an idea of the needs of fish shells. So there is more upfront knowledge that you have to invest in before you can reach the same level of knowledge and control that we have over mammalian cells.
And just one question, because we are asked this kind of questions every guest. So could you accelerate the process a lot with more money? So 3.5 million is maybe a lot for like a seed A round, whatever, but it's compared to the sheer size of the market in the industry, it's kind of nothing. That's probably just in the time of the podcast, there's more meat got eaten in the Amsterdam region than this 3.5 million. So could you like, let's say 10, 20 million, would this lead to a situation where your demo day is going to be held in like 1 year from now and not like 3 years from now? Is that possible? Can you really accelerate like the scientific process?
So there is a yes and a no to that. So no, and I've been saying this to all the other investors and also my co-founder from the start, cells don't eat money. If you are waving with $100 check, they won't work faster for you. They have a clock, they divide at a certain speed, so you cannot make them move faster. But on the other hand, you can do multiple things in parallel. So finding out multiple parameters to use the cells, or different scaling methodologies to pinpoint faster decisions on the large scale production of the cells. But eventually, there is a limited amount of speed you can induce in this process because of the cells. They are a limiting factor in the amount of time you need to go to market. But that not to say, of course, if we get more money, we can do more stuff. We can do maybe more species. We can maybe do more people from different bioreactors, comparing those together, already doing nutrient analysis, those types of things, so that we have a more sound data amount before we go to the Series A.
And how do you prove success to your investors? So all the other businesses we're interviewing, they do have kind of a product or service or software which they're which they're offering to the market, and then they sell it more or less successful, and they're giving KPIs back to the investors, saying, okay, our cost per order is, I don't know, 100 euros, and our earnings is 80 euros, customer lifetime value is XYZ, and please give us more money, because in like 2 years from now, with this like scaling curve, we can earn you much more money. So, what is your pitch then? Because you're telling me more or less, so if I understand it correctly, that there's no business model within the next 5-6 years. It's very research driven, so it costs money in the next years, and there's no earnings. Is that correct?
Well, the first 3 years, of course, we're hopefully then having the demo, and we are planning to sell that, but it will be very limited, of course. And I don't, if you're looking at food, the timelines for getting revenues back is just much longer. For making an application, you can put 10 programmers in a room, and the faster an application is being made. So
all our guests saying software development is so easy.
Yes.
That's not true.
So, but you can make software move faster, and it has much less capex. Investment. So food is just a different mindset. You need to find investors that have a different long-term mindset, that are really willing to go through the developmental process and really seeing that revenues building up over time. You cannot have like a hockey stick that in 6 years you can have $1 million in revenues. It takes time, and you need people supporting you during that time that want to help you through that phase. And I think we have found a perfect set of investors that are willing to do that and really share our vision on that. So you're not totally correct, because we will have some revenues, and this will be, of course, high-end markets, but it won't be a profit in the end. So reaching cost efficiency and profit, that will take some more time.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. So usually investors are very, very driven by KPIs, want to see like the monthly development, and you can say, okay, we have like successfully divided sales times 100, whatever, how fast the sales are growing. So what kind of KPIs would they see?
So for us, it will be more, that's the easy part, right? Because we can measure a lot of things. Science is about measuring. So we can measure, like you said, the differentiation speed or the proliferation speed. We can measure the amount of nutrients are being converted in the medium, so we can do analysis on that. So you can see how much you put in, how much you get out, and do the conversion rate on that. There's all just measurements for that. So you can really see, making graphs, seeing that drop over time, and doing experiments that you can actually have the influence that you can see that drop over time. So those are the deliverables that we show. We show then the report saying, okay, well, our sales grow this way on this scale, and this is the conversion rate, and we're trying to get that lowered by using this new technologies or this new development, and then gradually reducing the cost to, like, hopefully even cheaper than meat in the future.
If we look at your organization, Meatable, right now, you are especially focusing on R&D. And you need smart scientists for that process. Do you see that it's easy to find skilled people here in the Netherlands, in the Leiden area, to work on such a new innovation?
Yeah, we are very lucky. Leiden is the 5th largest bioscience park in Europe. I don't know if it's still the 5th, but it's in that range. Yeah. So it's huge, and there's a lot of talent there. But now also maybe it's nice for me to plug this in, that if you are a cell molecular biologist with bioreactor experience, please contact us at Meatable. My email address is daan@meatable.com, so please contact me, and we will be more than happy to see if we have a fit over here.
Okay, that's close to Den Haag. Okay.
It is very close to The Hague. It's very close.
Close to Amsterdam, to
close
Schiphol
to
Airport.
Amsterdam, so it's a perfect place, you can say. So you can really, the travel amounts everywhere is so small. You can live in Amsterdam. So my co-founder lives in Amsterdam and he works in Leiden. But in the surrounding area, it's very well connected. We have a very nice place. And definitely the science park is a vast amount of resources of skilled people that can help us with our journey.
And what you said about the development phases that you're going through, that I mean, I'm not an expert on the pharmaceutical industry, but I can imagine that medicines are being created in a similar way. Are there some characteristics from medicine production that are similar to cultured meat production?
The only thing I can think of is the scale. So using cells as a product at scale. Of course, the end product for us is vastly different, right? So usually the pharmaceuticals have a protein or a molecule that they use as a medicine, but we want to use the entire cell as a product, and then also then in a organized structure, like as meat structure. And that's where the analogies say stop, because pharmaceuticals don't care about that at all. So only the technology from the bioreactors and also some skills.
And the time to market maybe as well.
Yeah, that I don't know about that. I don't know how fast pipelines are for pharmaceutical industries and if that's comparable. Okay. And also the difference is, of course, we are using medical technology to make a commodity product. Yeah. So the prices differences is different, and also then the incentives to make certain choices are very different. So there are some overlap, but very few. But also the skills that people have, they can overlap a lot. So working with cells is translatable to any other field. If you can work with muscle cells, you can work with other cells. It's just a hard skill that you get and that we can use as well in our company.
So you're a very positive guy and you see a lot of opportunity for cultured meat, and I really admire the goal that you're striving for. Are there also some challenges along the way to grow to mass market? And
yes.
What are they?
Of course, and I think the biggest one is consumer adoption.
Yeah.
I do think that we're riding a wave now that everybody's feeling more positive about this and seeing that the positive impact that it can make. But of course, also technical challenges. There are, growing this at scale. We want to grow this at such a scale that has never been shown before, even the pharmaceutical industry. Because we want to supply a market which is massive, right? The amount of meat, like we said before in our conversation now, is already exceeding so many fold over in kilograms that you really need to do this at such a scale that is unprecedented in the current development. And that's where we go beyond that. And there, of course, is a challenge that I cannot assess right now or foresee on what things will happen and how that will look like in the end.
And in terms of the consumption shift, now there are a lot of documentaries about the same issues that you described in the beginning. Meat is causing climate change, is causing animal harm, maybe also some health issues related to that. Of course, you're taking that away. That will take another 8 to 10 years to be able to take that away. Right now you see a very large increase in plant-based foods and also plant-based beef. What do you foresee? Are you foreseeing to convince meat eaters to change to cultured meat? Or are you thinking that there will be a shift also from people like me?
Well, I hope so. Well, that's a question I can ask yourself. So if I would have the burger and it would be indistinguishable, would you eat it?
Yes, I would definitely try it. But I'm not sure if I'm a good representative for plant-based eaters or vegans. So I'm curious to see what their reaction will be. Actually, if you ask me that question, I would say yes, because the reason why I eat plant-based is due to the issues that you also described and the reasons why you started Meatable. So I completely align with your goals and the good fight that you're fighting. So I think I will be convinced to switch. And I think
that's great to hear. That's already another customer. So what we see in the population that we're targeting meat eaters because they are the ones that are eating meat, right? We're not targeting the plant-based eaters because they're not eating meat. But we do see the reason really matters on why people are not eating meat. Like yourself, you said, well, I see the negative effects and I see the animal harm. That's a reason for me to not eat meat, but you still enjoy it. So if you would have an alternative that is not as damaging, then why not? Then why wouldn't I be able to eat it? And of course, there are some, but few people from the media said, no, I wouldn't eat it. And for the rest, it's a mosaic of people having different sentiments about why not or why they do eat meat. So I think the majority is a yes, but of course, from both sides, we'll be switching over, saying, okay, so I don't want to eat cultured meat, so I'll start eating plant maybe, and plant eaters that are starting to eat meat again.
And how will your distribution look like? Are you going to have a direct-to-market approach? Are you cooperating with, the Albert Heijns of this world to white label Meatable in their products that they're selling? How will it look like, the supply chain to the mouth of the consumer?
So in the beginning, for really the demo part, I do think that you need to de-risk the market by showing that people actually want this and that people are waiting on this. So we really are thinking of having a flagship store somewhere that people can come in and experience, and we can educate them on and say, oh, this is how it's done. See, there's nothing scary about it. It's perfectly fine. It's actually better, and you can really take them on the idea of why we're doing this. And eventually, I don't think we're going to do the entire distribution channel. There are so many companies that already have that in place. So by the time that we can really put out bulk, I think partnering with a established distributor is very likely.
Okay, and that could be because in plant-based meat we have the Vegetable Butcher in the Netherlands, quite well-known brand. They actually sourced their plant-based protein from a company called Oja. And Oja was like a startup lab in the University of Wageningen in the Netherlands. And do you see yourself as a company that is similar to what Oja did, selling plant-based protein to companies that will make it into a burger and then build a brand around it? Or do you want to brand Meatable as well, and then Albert Heijn is selling it as a plant-based Meatable burger?
I think all of it. I think you can use the meat as an ingredient, but also just as a product on itself. And having just next to the other burgers, having the same thing there, saying, "Oh, this is the cultured variant of the real meat," but also having it on a pizza, for example. So I think all of the options are available still to us.
And if you have to choose, what's your gut feeling right now? What will be the fastest route to success?
That's difficult to say. I can see both situations very clearly. It really depends also on as an ingredient who wants to partner with us. Yeah. And I think having your own brand is easier than to sell. So I think both of them are just as viable. And I personally like the idea of having a real piece of meat, selling that, because I think that's the best way to market and also the purest way to show the benefits of it. But the other, for somebody, if Unilever or Unix comes by and say, "Hey, we want to use your product," we won't be saying no. I think would be a great development, and just as feasible.
Alexander, would you switch to cultured meat if it's available?
Of course, and I'm 100% convinced that that's going to work out for all sides. I think the moment when it's going to be cheaper, when it's there presented in the supermarket compared to like normal created meat, but looks the same more or less, people will buy it. So that's how it works. And in the meat industry, that's very interesting. That even to me, that's why I'm active there. There's no brands. So if you're going to a supermarket and selecting meat, so there's no Pringles. People only can know the difference in beef. So it's rumsteak and fillet, and sometimes something like Wagyu or bio meat. But there's no real brand. So people really are not so good educated when it comes to meat consumption, which is actually an advantage for this industry. Though the moment when you're able to scale, and that would be my question, is so can you see in your development today 1 kilogram artificially produced meat is like $1 million, and maybe half a year from now it's like $500,000. Is there some? Can you plot a curve something like this, so you can see in the moment in the future where it's going to be cheaper compared to standard meat?
Yeah, so if you look at, there are multiple models for this. So one, of course, is the computer model, so Moore's law, where you can see over time the cost of the chips producing. But I think a better model for this is looking at how DNA sequencing, which is a scientific technology where you can look into the DNA of people or any other species to analyze. And if you can see that curve, how much it costs to sequence, so to analyze the entire human genome, that has been dropping so fast over the past decade that for the entire human genome it's $1,000. While in 2003, I think, when the Human Genome Project was launched, it cost over $1 billion. So $1 billion, and over multiple countries wide. And now you can do it within 3 weeks for $1,000. And that's how scientific progress works. You're building on knowledge that your predecessors has made. So you're standing on the shoulders of giants. We are standing on the shoulders of giants. People have given their lives to learn about this and have published about this. And we are now at the tip of that, using that to have an application for it. And I think you can really see that really the price dropping is similar to that type of inventions and innovations. That eventually within the 3 years and then afterwards seeing that drop so fast, and with the scale and the new technologies coming out faster and faster every year, that within a decade I think you could have meat as cheap or cheaper than now regular meat.
Okay, let's assume you're going to be here in the Wimlex show again like in a year from now. So how much more what would you expect then, what you could tell us compared to the status today?
Yeah, that's going to be amazing, because then I will show you videos of real time how you can see stem cells differentiate into the right cells, into fat cells and muscle cells, and see them contract on the plate. Still very small, but still showing that the principle of what we're doing and the way of thinking, that we can go from the stem cell state to an adult cell state within a very fast amount of time. And also nutrient analysis on that. I can show you the reports and the videos of cells really moving from one state to another one. And then the only thing that you have to do is create a pipeline of making this bigger and making this more cost efficient.
It's for me still a super interesting topic, because it's kind of most of our for most people's life, the routine, eating meat, and same for me. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's all usually it includes meat. I don't want to discuss like the moral effects here and the environmental effects. I need to figure it out a little bit. Maybe later after the podcast. I'm still very confused why this is still such a small market compared to the sheer market size. So why there's not hundreds of Meatables everywhere. There's like hundreds of mattress online brands everywhere in a much smaller market, but not hundreds of companies that want to create meat. Maybe it depends a little bit on the stuff you need to control and need to know as a scientific as people active in this industry. But it's pretty cool having you here, and I have to, even after this podcast. So usually at least in my case, I know and understand the industry from the people that are guests here, and I'm active in your industry, but I have the feeling that it's only the beginning here of our interaction, and I will be happy to host you again as a guest here.
I
in
would
2019.
love that. That's very much. Thank you
Thanks
so
so
much.
nice to follow your progress.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you so much for listening to this podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, our next guest will tell us a little bit more about like the profane marketing side. So he helped Zalando to grow in revenue in Germany and in some international markets. So it's more about we're going back to our home turf again, though it was a very physical product. So a product we can touch and taste in the future, hopefully. But the next guest will be a little bit more in our home turf again. But thanks again.
Thank you so much, Dan.